One of my colleagues and I stole a very large reclining chair out of another colleague's office and replaced it with a small chair, and she hasn't noticed, and it's been 3 hours. And at one point we were like two faculty like running down a hall with like a large chair. So we're very professional over here at Western.
Nice work. I'm a big fan of nonsense. Well, I think let's just get started. We've got a good group here today. And Marisa, can you just continue to monitor the waiting room and let folks in? That'd be great. Welcome, everyone. My name is Terry Bryant. I'm the director of the Whatcom Homeless Service Center at Opportunity Council and the chair of this group. And I'm going to start us out with our land acknowledgement. We gather today on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people who've lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for Indigenous neighbors, the Lummi Nation and Nooksack tribe, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. Okay, first up on our agenda, I've got Madeline Anthony from Skagit County, and I want to make sure she's here. Yes. Madeline, thanks for joining us. I know you wanted a little bit of time on our agenda today to talk about the Skagit Home Consortium, but I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to kind of orient this group to what that is. We've got all varying levels of involvement in the homeless housing system, so it'd be great if you could kind of just give us a quick orientation before you get started. And I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Yes, thank you. Thanks for having us today. Y'all have a big group. That's really awesome. So my name is Madeline, and I work at Skagit County Public Health, and as a housing resource coordinator. And I've been here less than a year, so learning a whole lot. And I don't know if I can share a few slides or if I should just keep talking. If you want to.
Sure, you can. You should be able to share your screen.
Okay, I'll try. All right. Oh. Y'all can see this now? Is that right? Uh-oh.
I don't see anything.
Okay.
While we're working on that, I just realized I forgot to invite everyone to introduce yourselves in the chat.
Oh.
Especially if you'd like to have your email added to our list, include that, and we'll make sure you get agendas going forward. And Madeline, if you're having some trouble, maybe Marisa. Oh, it's working. We see it.
Oh, cool. Nice. Okay. Okay. So I'll get started. Does it sound good? All right. Cool. So I'm also joined today with Shelley Chose, a colleague of mine who's been around a bit longer. And so our home consortium is a group. First of all, our Skagit County is the lead of the home consortium, and the reason we're here is we're putting together our 2023 to 27, our 5-year consolidated plan. So we're just gathering community feedback from different groups across our region. So the home consortium is a combination of the Skagit County, Island County, and Whatcom County, but not including Bellingham. They have their own home funding, as well as 17 other towns and municipalities. And so Skagit County is the lead, which is why we're taking on the development of the 5-year plan. And so, let's see. We're moving on to the next slide. Let's see. Oh. I don't think it's moving. My slide isn't changing up. Let's see.
It looks different to me. It says
Oh,
annual funding is
great.
1
Yeah.
million.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm,
You
thank
see
you.
slide
Cool.
3.
Awesome.
yeah.
Okay, so it's moving along.
Yeah.
So yeah, annually we do get roughly about $1 million. And so part of our plan, we want to develop our priorities and we want community feedback to figure out the best way to plan the funding. So with the home funds, we can support development of affordable housing, rental assistance programs, so that the TBRA programs, home buyer assistance, like for first-time low-income home buyers. And also some of the funding can go to support the CHODO, the community housing development organizations. For example, like home trust programs, different kind of nonprofit specialized programs. All right. And so the home funding is pretty specific, like we can't support shelters, for example, but we do want to just hear in general what folks are seeing as some of the greatest kind of gaps and challenges. And so with the 5-year plan, we want to evaluate the affordable housing needs and the local housing market conditions. We're going to make data-driven investment decisions and include like community-wide feedback, so different focus groups in different areas of the consortium region. We can amend the plan, and the 5-year plan includes the first 2023 annual action plan. And so in general, the timeline, we're going to be doing a lot of the data collection and community conversations throughout February and March. In April, we'll open for public comment and have our draft put out. And we should plan to submit the final plan in May. So I have a few questions to ask today, and I'll take some notes. They're kind of broad questions, so feel free to spit out ideas. We'll also have a survey out in the next week or two, so we'll be sending that your way, and you can add more on the survey. So, so the first big question is, describe the greatest housing challenges in your community. So we kind of know some of the things we'll hear, but you want to just spit some out. I'm not watching the chat, but I can go back and check if people add anything into the chat.
I'll go ahead and start. We need more affordable housing. We know that. Our vacancy rates are extremely low. And you're looking for feedback from areas outside the Bellingham city limits, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So our smaller cities are feeling the crunch as well. And we are seeing families who might not have chosen to leave Bellingham having to look for housing in those areas because it's slightly more affordable, but still out of reach for many. I'm looking at the chat. Let's see, lack of 811 HUD housing from Catherine. Housing that fails to accommodate and support the residents. Marisa, was that you? Can you say more about that?
It was me. I think it's just a matter of, one, we want to push the idea of housing, but housing looks different to everyone. And on top of that, once someone gets into housing, there are times when their support systems fall to the wayside because other people may recognize, oh, they're housed now, they don't need anything. The other piece of that is that, even though we really want to see housing first still isn't perfect, right? There's still some flaws within housing first that makes even the hardest to serve, once they're housed, still experience struggles. So I think there's a few combinations of things going on here.
Any other thoughts? I see some folks joining from outside the city limits, so I kind of just want to reorient what our discussion is. And Skagit Home Consortium is a 3-county coalition that is planning for funding and how to spend money to support housing needs, and they're looking for feedback from us specific to areas outside of the city of Bellingham and Whatcom County. So we'd love to hear your feedback to share with Madeline. Samia says more group homes, housing options that assist with daily living for disabled and medically fragile. And I would echo that.
May I offer something?
Go for it, Vaughn.
Okay. Hi. Along the lines of what we've been talking about, one of the things that I can't get out of my head is making all of the housing options, possible housing options for people, not only to house themselves, but in terms of real estate development and everything. I would love to see more super accessible education. I've been thinking about how with AI, like what if there were an app to pair people up or group people up, like you download an app and then you get you upload your profile and you can swipe left or swipe right on somebody who has the same kind of governance style as you, they have the same kind of like communication conflict resolution style that or a compatible thing.
Roommate matching.
With you.
Yeah.
A room,
like
yeah. And then, but also in terms of another AI thought, I think this has also been tossed around before, but like if the planning departments had AI that like, imagine if you went to the planning department website and it were like a Lowe's website and you have a robot that says, hi, what are you looking for? And you put, oh, I'm looking to create an ADU. And it's like, oh, really? What kind of, how much square footage are you thinking? What kind of materials would you like? Here, would you like to look at a dozen templates that we have pre-made for you? And you can get some ideas. And how about some case studies that you want to look at to see what other successful projects have come to fruition? So for me, in addition to what everybody else is saying too, is like the greatest housing challenges. Like the kind of education that is also entertaining and that inspires people to come up with their own solutions, and just to see how much something that inspires them to be very creative with it. I hope I'm making sense. Thanks for listening to me ramble.
Thank you, Vaughn. I think those are really creative ideas and I appreciate it.
I have an input if that's okay, Pam. I've been in the weeds recently trying to utilize the housing choice voucher, looking at all the open availability, and there's very little consistency on how to apply for a unit. It's getting better, but it is still, it's just inconsistent throughout the whole application process, and finding open units, it's just a needle in a haystack. So that could definitely be an area of focus.
Can I make sure I understand? So not the application process of Section 8, but just different apartment house applications.
Yes, to use any type of funding. It's so challenging. Yeah, the housing choice voucher is one example of funding source, but I'm talking about finding available units and understanding where you're used, what the client income limitations are. It's so complicated. I don't know how our clients are ever expected to sort through that on their own. So yeah, that could definitely be simplified and more consistent. I say that, but it's a lot of different things. It's like we have websites you can go to that have some of the affordable housing listed, but not all of the affordable housing. So you're going to numerous different websites. Most of them are requiring you to go to a website. You can't call and ask for vacancies hardly at all anymore. takes like 3 or 4 phone calls to get through to an apartment building just to say, hey, do you have availability? So you end up doing that online, but it's inconsistent as to, you go to the floor plan, you click on the floor plan. If it's vacant, it'll say apply here. And some of that is connected. And for example, the last client had a housing choice voucher, and the housing authority has a nice little website that you can view all the things that they've applied for through them. So something to make that more widespread, and also where you find open units to try to apply for. Yeah, it's a mess.
That doesn't work on nice house. Maybe a little. But
Madeline, would you like
I'll
me to
go
read
on.
some of the information from the chat?
Oh, sure. And I can go back. I'll go back and jot notes down.
And I'm
Couple-
grabbing notes from
Thank
the
you.
chat as we're going
Great.
too.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I'll move on to the next question unless anybody else want to add anything. Okay. And so the next question, I only have a couple more. So the next question is, are there certain populations that should be prioritized? I heard senior and disabled earlier, but certain populations that should be prioritized for more resources for affordable housing.
I would echo that, and especially what Chris's remark in the chat about seniors and folks with disabilities on fixed income.
Mm-hmm.
Families with children,
Mhm.
seniors and persons fleeing DV, large families are having difficulty securing housing, all vulnerable humans.
Okay, all right. And so just again, the home funds are pretty specific to what they can be used for. So we can do development, building of affordable units, home ownership programs, the TBRA, tenant-based rental assistance, move-in costs, kind of temporary 1 to 2 years rental assistance programs. And so we do want to mention some of the needs that we're hearing are like shelter needs, drop-in shelter, day shelter, enhanced kind of emergency, but we can't use home funding for that. But we just want to hear in general, what are the greatest priorities that you think should be priority? Yeah.
I have a question. Earlier in the chat, Marisa suggested the need for group housing with single room occupancy, kind of like a boarding house. Is that kind of housing eligible for this funding?
Oh, well, it maybe depends. So
Home projects have to meet pretty specific property standards. So that is really so like rental development and single room occupancy type projects can be funded under home. They just have to, when the project is finished, they have to meet the property standards associated with home funds. And so that would kind of be like the ultimate deciding factor as to whether a project like that would be eligible for home funding, would be like what the project design actually is, and whether that would be a good fit. So there's some nuts and bolts and things that are involved because it's federal funding that would really be the determining factor. And I did see the question in the chat that is asking about whether it can pay for on-site supportive services, and it cannot. Home funding isn't a funding source that can pay for that ongoing supportive services.
But it could be used for development and then other funding sources to support for the supportive side of yeah. And as I mentioned, a survey will be coming out soon, so we're going to push that your way also, so you can share more information on that, and also forward to colleagues and people clients you're serving. And
we'll be sure to send that to the coalition, and that'll be, include lots of folks that aren't even attending today. So we'll get the word out.
Yeah. And I don't have any other specific questions, but if anybody, anything else to add, I can jot down final thoughts.
I've seen in the chat interest in adult family homes, and that's an interest of mine too. I don't know if you've heard, but we're participating in the development of short-term respite in partnership with Unity Care and the county and Peace Health. And my fear is that it will become kind of a de facto staging for people who really need long-term care. So if we had places for folks to go that were local and not have to go to, we find a lot of people finding placement in like Snohomish County out of necessity, not out of choice. So I just want to reiterate that need.
Okay. Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks to you and Shelley both for joining us and sharing this information and soliciting some good questions. We'll share your survey.
Can we listen in a little bit longer? Or
you're free to
kick us
stay.
out?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. We have some great speakers today, and our topic is domestic violence. So today we're lucky to have Susan Marks, Director of the Commission on Sexual and Domestic Violence, joining us. Adrian Renz, Executive Director for DVSAS Whatcom, joining us, and Michael Mandala is a Permanent Supportive Housing Program Manager at Opportunity Council, which includes overseeing Dorothy Place, which is a permanent supportive housing project of Opportunity Councils that serves specifically survivors of domestic violence. It would be great to hear from all three of you, and then we'll have some opportunity for questions and answers. Who wants to go first?
I nominate Sue because she can give us the overview and then we'll kind of drill down. But
great
do you
suggestion.
accept my nomination?
Thank you.
I do.
That's fine. I was just saying, I think it would be great if Adrian went first to talk about the real impact on survivors, and then I could, but I don't mind going first. I, like everything else, I'm over prepared. So I have a PowerPoint, so I'm going to try to share my screen as well. I feel like PowerPoints are the kind of a hassle, but to share. But let's make sure. There you go. Okay, and now do it as a slideshow. Were you all seeing it like as a slideshow and not with? Great. Okay, so just briefly, yeah, my name is Susan. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with the Bellingham Whatcom County Commission on Sexual and Domestic Violence. So we are a kind of quasi-governmental organization with the city and the county has formed to address the way that systems are responding to domestic violence and sexual assault to improve interventions and preventions at a systemic level. That's kind of a lot of words and a really big charge. And so some of the specific things we're working on currently this year we're working on developing a pilot project of restorative and transformative justice responses for survivors. We're working on improving responses for survivor defendants, so survivors who have been charged with a crime, often related to sexual assault or domestic violence. We're doing case reviews where we look at specific cases and try to learn from a deep dive into a specific case about improvements in intervention prevention. We're doing work on connecting with the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and People Task Force the Attorney General's Office has to improve systemic responses in this community, and working with schools and courts on some issues that they are working on resolving in their responses. So those are some of the areas we're focusing this year. And today I'm going to present, more of the scope of the problem and some resources that we have. And then, Adrian, and it looks like Miranda's here, can speak more about their leading the charge on providing those services directly to survivors. So a broad overview is our data in 2021, and it's actually 2022 as well. Some of our data agencies compile it and then get it to us. We're usually close to 6 months to a year behind, but survivors, some of the things that are impacting survivors currently in our community are, see if I can move, I need to move this thing so I can read my own slide. Yeah, COVID-19, of course, impacted survivors, continues to impact survivors, especially the last couple of years. The floods in Whatcom County in 2021 impacted survivors, impacted the economic health of people, which always impacts survivors. There were major changes to protection order laws in the 2021 legislative session, which went into effect last summer. We've made a lot of progress in the backlog of testing of sexual assault kits. And actually there are now requirements for timing when they have to be tested, and major national threats to reproductive justice impact survivors in this state and community as well. A couple other things that we've seen is reports of sexual assault to law enforcement. It was about domestic violence. I'm still going to talk about sexual assault because I can't not. Reports of sexual assault to law enforcement have been decreasing over the past couple of years. No, there's absolutely no evidence the incidents are going down. It is law enforcement are tracking reports differently, which is an issue of interest to us and how reports are being tracked. Fewer than a third of protection orders are being granted for a permanent protection order, which permanent actually means a year. And that is very low compared to the statewide average. It's something else we're paying attention to and trying to solve some of that problem. Northwest Youth Services continues to provide us with good data about their young adult housing program, and that continues to be more than half of youth who are there have experienced domestic violence at some point in their lifetime. And then domestic violence calls for help to law enforcement are remaining the same. They went down in 2020, have gone back up. So those are some of the kind of big picture things that we're seeing in this county. Okay, but now why isn't it moving? See, okay. So, and related to homelessness, we have put together our annual data report. One of the things we put together is data from the point in time count. So one of the first things you may notice when you look at this is that not all the dots are connected and not every year has a dot. So something that has changed over the years are the questions that are asked in the point in time count and whether or not there is a question about domestic violence. Some years it has been asked questions about what are your reasons for homelessness, and domestic violence is listed as a reason. And those are the years for which we have data. And there were some years in which it was asked separately of individuals and families with children, and we don't have that for recent years. But what we see is, regardless, there are a significant number of people that say domestic violence is a reason for our homelessness. That number has gone up over the past few years. That question was not asked in recent years because of the reduced questions with COVID contact. I'm not sure what it's going to look like this year. But it's something that definitely provides us with a lot of information about, what are the reasons contributing. And as you can see, the numbers were always higher for families with children experiencing homelessness. So that would be something we would be curious to know more about as well. We also did, this was 10 years ago, but there is no reason to believe any of this has changed. We did case reviews at that time of domestic violence homicides in Whatcom County and reviewed a number of cases. In every single case, we found that the victim's lack of access to safe and affordable housing made her more vulnerable to the ongoing violence, including when they were still living with the person and when they had left the person. That housing was a major factor in each of those homicides, or a lack of housing. And as I said, I'm also going to talk about sexual assault. And one thing is that there's no graph about local sexual assault and the connection to homelessness. We don't ask that question, in a lot of our, the point in time count is something that's hard to get local data on. But there is national data that says, compared to low-income women who have housing, the sexual assault experience of homeless women are much likely to be more violent and to include multiple acts. I feel like this narrative is extremely important because I think if we talk in the general community, people think of sexual assault and homelessness, and they think of people who are homeless perpetrating sexual assault. People who are housed, and the national data shows, probably not shocking to any of you, it goes the other way, that people who are unhoused are much more vulnerable to being targeted for sexual violence by people who are housed. And this statement was put out by the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence, that says the condition of homelessness itself dramatically increases women's risk of being sexually assaulted, and women on the street do not enjoy the same degree of safety as women who have four walls and a roof to protect them, which feels obvious when you say it like that. But I think that's a narrative that needs to be changed in the way our community talks about people who are unhoused or who's vulnerable. Some of the resources that we have available. So in 2018, we put together most of our data from 2017, which is why it's called the 2017 report. But we also put together what we called a spotlight report on how homelessness and housing instability are connected to domestic violence and sexual assault. And in that, there's some of the most recent local data we had at the time, as well as some statewide data for people who like that kind of information. We also have recommendations for all practitioners who are working with people who are survivors or who are homeless, specific to housing providers, specific to advocates, elected officials, and for our commission, some systemic work. And that report has links to resources, including relevant books and reports, some safety planning tools specific to people who are facing housing instability or unhoused, and a relationship violence toolkit for homeless and runaway youth. So there's some links in that one. We also put out a toolkit in 2020. We had a master's of public health student that worked on this toolkit and put together some background information, as well as some discipline specific guidelines for a number of disciplines, including housing providers. And it includes information, well, just kind of the background section has some of the data, some examples of impact, some like clear myths and facts, which I think are always worth reading. And it also includes information how to support survivors, including just what are some words you can use to provide validation and support. It has data about the intersections between gender-based violence and housing insecurity, some specific safety concerns for survivors, some more systems improvement recommendations, and some safety planning tools for survivors who run shelters. So there's a little overlap between those two tools, which someday we'll have the time to maybe combine them into one, but that's not at the top of my list right now. And then there's some tools. Someone mentioned Housing First, and domestic violence. Housing First is very much a part of our broader movement and our Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, which does statewide work around domestic violence, recently released a report on the path to safety and stability, finding the first of its kind longitudinal study. And so Washington State had a number of demonstration sites. One of the initial pilot sites was actually the Lummi Nation, was part of the initial pilot, and then they moved into a number of demonstration sites and worked together with the Michigan State University to do long-term evaluation, and unsurprisingly found that DV Housing First is more effective than services as usual. And they also have a Housing First toolkit, and within those two report in the toolkit, there are things that communities can do, even if we're not doing the official, like full Housing First model as they set it up, ways that we can implement within our different agencies, things that move towards, even doing just general Housing First and having strong connections between housing survivors and advocates is a part of Housing First, even if we don't have the official title and how we're providing the response in this community. So that's a tool that's available as well on the State Coalition's website. And then I also wanted to just kind of back up to the big picture of this housing, homelessness, housing stability, affordable housing all follows really under this broad brush of economic justice. And this is really like key to not only intervention, I think we kind of take it as like an intervention, but also is absolutely prevention of domestic violence is one of the things that we know that works in preventing domestic violence is for people to have the financial stability that they need, that they can meet their cost of living. So again, WSCDF defines economic justice as everyone having access to money, housing, childcare, healthcare, and education, so they can make decisions about their relationships without regard for the financial impact of those decisions. So housing really falls in this broad brush of economic justice. And again, this was from the actually Futures Without Violence, which is a national technical assistance organization, ways that we can advocate for economic justice. So things we can do in our own lives, in our own organizations. A lot of this is about like, are we paying even our own staff, our own coworkers enough that they could leave an abusive relationship? Can people in our organization survive and raise their own children or take care of their whatever, like can they meet their own cost of living without their partner? And so some of the things is obviously we need access to affordable, reliable, and flexible quality childcare. Hopefully the proposition that just passed will help meet some of those gains in this community. Extensive and flexible paid leave for survivors to care for themselves and their families. We need safe and trauma-informed workplaces that respect and accommodate survivors, workplace development programs, a workplace free of sexual harassment and mechanisms to seek justice for those harms, equal pay for all survivors in any job or workplace, accessible social safety nets that provide quality supports, accessible tax credits, and cash assistance and flexible financial support where we're getting cash directly into the hands of survivors to support their stability and safety, and then universal basic income, which just not enough up on the legislative session, but I know that there was proposed to be a bill on universal basic income in Washington State. I have no idea if that's like made it to a committee, out of a committee, what the thing is, but that would definitely be a thing that would help survivors. So I wanted to kind of take that. I'm already zooming back and zoom all the way back and say this whole thing falls within this need for economic justice, of which housing is a part. So that's my contact information. I'm going to stop sharing anyway. So that's kind of the big picture. I'm happy to answer questions later and let Adrian and Michaela kind of fill in.
Thanks so much, Susan. I just want to tell you that I really appreciate you sharing those resources. I've had staff just this week ask for additional education on a really good way to serve this population that is experiencing trauma in a different way from others. And then I also want to mention that I noted, I was looking at your data report from 2021 that was released in October. I noticed that the reporting for DV was kind of flat. And I was a little surprised because in our homeless housing system, we're seeing a dramatic uptick in applications. So I'm wondering if there's opportunity for share a different kind of data with you ongoing about what we're seeing over time rather than the point in time count, which can be pretty varied.
Yes, I know we would love that. We would love to present. I mean, one of the things that report tends to be very legal system heavy because that's who keeps really strong, I shouldn't say strong data, but they keep data. And so we would love to like round out that report with better data from other systems. And so I will definitely have my coworker is kind of leads that charge on the data report, and I will have her be in touch with you if you think that's something you can help with.
Awesome.
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Well, Vaughn has a question.
I was wondering if you could pull up the slide with the Michigan State University part again, or because I missed the website, but I was wondering how much more effective specifically was it compared to services as usual?
Okay. There's the slide, and I've not read the full report. So I don't know the answer to that question. I've read their kind of summary of the report, which is that it's more effective, helps survivors have stability over the long term, will like their own home. It provides more safety in their own home over being in a shared home. But yeah, I haven't read the full report. So I would love someone else reads it to know what they think. I trust the state coalition. So I'm just like, yes, they said it. So I agree with it.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no other burning questions, let's go ahead and move on. Adrian, are you okay going next? Awesome, thank you.
I am. I always like hearing Susan talk, so thank you. Kind of makes my brain expand a little bit to how we can get ahead of some of this stuff if we ever find time. I'm here with Miranda, and I'm also going to share a PowerPoint. And Miranda Morris is our safe housing manager, and so she'll talk specifically about the safe housing program we have, but I thought I'd start with a bit of an overview on who we are and services we offer, programming. So we're domestic violence and sexual assault services. We are, supporting individuals affected by domestic violence and sexual assault and sexual exploitation as well, and leading to the community towards ending these abuses of power. I always think it's interesting to look at how we started, because it really is one of those community-based agencies. I mean, here's the pool of volunteers in 1979 that were Whatcom Crisis Line, and the calls that were taken at that time were any type of crisis in support of getting people connected with services in our community. And we are very much, to this day, still very volunteer organization. Pre-pandemic, we probably had about 100 volunteers that were working with us regularly in offering the services that I'll go through. Through the pandemic, we probably have gone to 20, and we're back to trying to rebuild that pool of resource we have with such a large volunteer pool. In 1998, we changed our focus to be primarily domestic violence and sexual assault. But right before that, we were the local AIDS hotline as well. So we've had many years of being the hotline for Whatcom County. 2007, we really formalized our partnership with law enforcement, and we are now kind of the go-to call when they show up to a domestic violence call and they do an assessment. They'll connect with us immediately. And in 2014, we took over what had been Women Care Shelter, which is our family safe shelter. And 2018, we've expanded our safe housing options, and we'll talk a bit more about those. Just for us, much like Susan was saying, the DV and SA have such an overlap at time and some of the same dynamics at play. So I can't talk about DV without coming in with some sexual assault as well. And of course, we know it does impact the houseless community. So we just define that act that can occur when somebody is forced or coerced into sexual acts without clear consent. It's important to note that it may not be illegal under state and federal law. So we're looking more at the individual's experience when they're calling us and reporting a concern. And with the dynamics of DV, we're looking at a systemic pattern of behavior used to establish power and control over another person, which would primarily be an intimate partner. And it can come in so many forms, from belittling comments and oppressive gender roles to straight physical assault, which may be more of what people think of. But we've definitely see it escalate to homicide and have had that occur in our community too many times. And just because it hasn't gotten to that physical realm, it doesn't mean it isn't serious or that it won't escalate to that point. And we'll go through a little bit. Some of the reasons somebody may not leave that we're very aware of when we train our advocates is, the family pressures. We've definitely had people come back after a parent called and encourage them to return home. They'll leave our safe housing. Really strong concerns about losing child custody when you do not have stable housing. Definitely the financial barriers. Being isolated. Many people experiencing DV may be isolated at that time. It's part of the control. So they may not have a resource to reach out to. And so as individuals that may connect with our community members, that's where DV SAS can come in, where that place that they can call when it feels like there's no one else to call. And then low self-esteem, some shame that may come up, and we do see some people turn to chemical dependency and start having mental health concerns as related to ongoing domestic violence. Just talking about why that kind of financial barrier that comes up for our clients, and the demographic we're looking at is when we look at asset limited, income constrained, and employed. So the survival budget, which we call for ALICE, is survival, a single person needing to make at least $23,000. But knowing that we've had inflation and that we have a tight housing market, so I'd say it's even above that, and that's just for pure survival, not allowing for any stability and savings for what may come up, and not for reliable communication. That's kind of the pay-as-you-go method, all of those pieces. And when we look at our DV SAS clients, we've got 99% of our clients are below the threshold for ALICE. So some serious financial barriers to being able to leave a situation and to be able to avoid becoming homeless. And also to note, and I'll bring this up again, is that 50% of domestic violence and sexual assault victims may lose their jobs as a result of the trauma experience. So when Susan's talking about excess opportunities for leave from a workplace, or a workplace work being a kind of wraparound to acknowledge when somebody's going through this, it stands because it is about that financial security that will give somebody an opportunity to get away from this situation. And there's some workplace policies and procedures that are also on that commission site that I'll talk about again in a little bit. But what we do find is that financial abuse is occurring in 94% of domestic violence relationships. So a strong method of control. The services that we offer are and many of you may know about these ones, is our 24-hour, 24/7 helpline. It's anytime somebody needs a call, our state contract is that we will provide a call back within 20 minutes. If we're busy, they can leave a message or call back, but that we make contact with an individual within 20 minutes, if not immediately upon them calling. And we are there to do all kinds of safety planning. We can do screening for shelter need, the whole gamut. There'll be times where we'll get a call from an emergency room support to go while somebody's getting a sexual assault. screening, and we'll go and support with law enforcement issues. So we have a 24-hour service team. Then we do ongoing support services. That's more of the meet with somebody, maybe help them do some safety planning, help them draft or work through the paperwork of a protection order. In the past, we've had more of a legal advocacy and really supporting somebody and being able to show up in the courtroom. That is funding that's gone away, but we still endeavor to provide that service for people. And it's one of the top requests that we receive from our advocacy team. So they're looking for shelter if they need to get away, or they're needing some legal support in order to provide that, not losing the children, having a protection order. We also do support groups. And then we recently just started with a rural advocate, and they are available and making rounds throughout Whatcom County, not Bellingham specific, and into all of the schools, as well as an advocate for walk-in services. We have the Safe Housing Program, which I'll have Miranda talk about in a moment. And then we do a Safe Start program with some children's advocacy, supportive play groups for children, and then some CPS support for parents going through these cases, as well as some jail support services. We're doing support groups in the jail, and then prevention education, because as Susan said, we know prevention can work. And so we're in many of the schools and teaching the whole gamut of work. And then again, following up with advocacy should somebody need that direct support. All of these services, what I did want to say is we are a state accredited program, and that requires us to have intensive initial and ongoing training. So we're just to become a volunteer or to begin working with DVSAS, you have 52 hours of training you must do on advocacy-based counseling. And then you have ongoing mandated training, as well as performance metrics, and that's for all staff, volunteers, and our board. So when we think of the dynamics, I just want to say, when you send somebody there, they're surrounded by somebody who's been through some extensive training, much shadowing, and they are very familiar and comfortable in working with the dynamics that might be at play with a sexual assault or domestic violence situation. Miranda, do you want to chime in and share some information more about I'll go back to our safe housing program specifically?
Sure. So we have 3 different locations for our safe housing program. One is primarily the family shelter, where we can house up to 5 families at a time, and around 21 bodies, whether that be, kiddos, adults, 5 usual adults as the head of households. We can sometimes fluctuate depending on if we have a very large family that comes in. We are able to sometimes move, an extra bed or 2 into a room. And then at our other locations, it's kind of almost like the alternative shelter, I would say. So for clients who maybe have those pets, for individuals, for singles, we're able to kind of move those around to fit the needs as best as we can for clients who come into shelter. These are some numbers for 2022. So we were able to, you can see, offer 9,205 bed nights total. So that's combined adults and children. The average night stay was right around 62 days. This was spread between 79 different individuals, and our unit utilization rate for 2022 went back up to 84%. And a lot of these numbers are on the way back to mirroring pre-COVID numbers, which is exciting that we're seeing some movement in terms of people are seeking the services and are able to come into shelter. I'll get into some of the barriers in a second that we're also seeing with that. We served 288 hotel stays, which is down dramatically from the last few years when hoteling was kind of the go-to with trying to navigate through COVID, and 51 total kiddos. And then Adrienne, do you want to go to the next slide? Perfect. Some of the challenges that we see a lot with our clients, as everybody knows who's here, is affordable housing availability, obviously. A huge barrier is the availability of immediate mental health or medical health services. A lot of times we have clients who come in where that is a dynamic of power and control, is that those services have been withheld from them. And so it's hard for them to access those things while also trying to come in and triage their own DV experience and find housing. Safe hotel options and safe treatment options for substance abuse disorders are also a huge barrier. And I say safe because hotel options have become limited just in terms of we are a small community and a lot of programs access the same hotels to be able to place clients. So when our shelters are full, if we have to place a client in a hotel, one of the safety planning that we're doing is your abuser going to know to look for you there, because it has been well known to go to this hotel to look for somebody or go to this one. That's where people are placed. There's also the dynamic with anyone who wants to receive services for substance abuse disorder. There's limited options for them to go to any kind of outpatient or inpatient treatment where the abuser can also frequent or send people to look for them. And then, as Adrian kind of touched on before, the reduced legal options is also a barrier for clients. And even knowing where to begin navigating through that as well is a barrier.
Do we have more? Nope. Okay. I'm going to jump back in for just one moment. Here's just some of the other snapshot of the services we provide. What stands out to me is 11,930 advocacy-based counseling sessions in 2021, and the level of legal advocacy sessions as well. And some of the reasons those advocacy-based counseling sessions are so high is we can see that when somebody comes and accesses our services over 6 times, that the positive impact of those services really starts to grow. And so we see an increase in people understanding the dynamics of DV and SA, which hopefully would lead to not having that cycle repeat itself into the future. They definitely increase their ability around safety planning. And I think that's part of understanding the cycle, and then increasing a knowledge of the options available for them. So we go ahead and put forward as many advocacy-based services as we can, knowing that the more that we've built that connection with somebody, that the outcomes for them long-term will improve. And then I'm just like, how do people access services? I get this question quite a bit. So I want to say our business hours are kind of, but this is business, standard Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And there, I gave you our business line as kind of service providers. That would be a great place for you to call and have general inquiries, or if you need a presentation to a team, you can reach us there. Our clients, they can have walk-in hours Monday through Wednesday, 10 to 2 at this time, and we're just continually assessing when we need to expand that. And then we have our 24-hour call line, and that's full access to advocacy-based counselors. So if you have a client that you connect with, the 24-hour call line would be the place to route them through, unless you're wanting to connect with us as staff in a more business session. We do crisis intervention, referrals through that, and as well as providing medical exam and law enforcement support. I would say that we're taking a lot of appointments. So somebody may call 24-hour call line, start their advocacy conversation, and then end up setting multiple appointments with us. And those tend to run on our business hours, as long as it's not an imminent emergency. If we feel that somebody's screening in, I'll stop sharing for a second. If we feel that somebody is screening in for shelter, then they'll transfer them directly to our safe housing team, so that somebody isn't having to repeat their story to each of our advocacies as they go through the process. We just want to get them to the quickest point so that they can have a conversation with safe housing and see how to best navigate their situation and what they're needing at that time. What I did want to share as far as impact, and one of the last screen I'd had up, I'm just going to read, was a point that I wanted to make. Even, yes, we are serving people as all of us in this meeting are all serving individuals, and we want to be of support to them. But I also wanted to call out, just we're all part of a workplace, and I think the impact of DV and SA have shown up in workplaces, and we see about the financial impact and the likelihood of somebody losing their job as a result of this. And I think that we all, as co-workers and co-community, have a real unique opportunity to intervene and respond in our everyday settings where somebody's actually having their lived experience. And it's easy to think of programs and services for others, but we know 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men are experiencing intimate partner violence. And that means we are talking and thinking about our neighbors, our coworkers, our friends, and our family. And that's where we, DVSAS, are here to partner in supporting this effort. So if you see anything, you know, that's the moment to just make sure that they're aware of this service, even if it's in a break room. And then I wanted to call out the work that the DV and SA Commission had done around some workplace policies to help support the type of environment that allows somebody to feel safe and comfortable in coming forward and not feeling that they'll actually be shamed out of the workplace for, you know, all of the shame that they may feel about it, but to create an environment where they know the workplace has their back while they navigate a difficult situation. So I wanted to call that out for all of us as well. And then just note that we have advocacy counselor training. So we have extensive training. It does focus on serving sexual assault and domestic violence, but it also provides a baseline foundation for identifying signs and engaging in advocacy-based support. And that is an open opportunity in the community. It's extensive hour commitment, but I want to put that out there as well as a resource. And I think we see a lot of people aspiring to be in human service come in, take that training, and kind of launch into probably many of your programs have some DVSAS former volunteers or staff within them. And that's what DVSAS has.
Thank you so much for that. And I really appreciate your observations about hotels in particular. That's our main shelter system for families with children. And we really struggle with this too. Abusers are able to find, you know, their victims in hotels. Hotels are not confidential sites. So we really struggle with that shelter capacity as well. I have 2 little questions. That's okay. One was the legal advocacy that you do. I wonder if you make any referrals to family law support, people who need parenting plans.
Do you mean to the family law facilitators in the courts or to attorneys?
Or to either one? What does that look like?
We try not to have the favoritism, and I think we've gotten feedback before because we can know what some family law attorneys are willing to take on or comfortable knowing the dynamics. Definitely utilize family law facilitators. The feedback I've had right now in discussing things with family law attorneys locally is that there's actually an extreme shortage of them just for the general group. And then there's a couple of them that have been like, oh, they're very comfortable. One became a judge in the court system, and the other one is saying, I won't do a DV case because the dynamics are so intensive that it's a lot to have to navigate. So even that family law attorney, we do partner with law advocates and are always looking for different grant opportunities to fund a specific, family law attorney or advocate that can really walk alongside them in that court system. But that's just an ongoing search, but a need that the community has.
Thank you. And then my other quick question, and then I'll stop, is I'm wondering if you can say more about financial abuse. I don't know that we always think about that when we're thinking about people experiencing domestic violence. Like, what does that look like? How would you recognize it?
How would you recognize it? Susan, do you have any thoughts, or Miranda, do you have any thoughts on how you would go about recognizing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like one of those things, just like the nuanced paying attention to things people say, such as, so it could be things like they don't have access to their own paycheck, or they don't get to make decisions. they don't know, they don't have access to their own retirement account. Maybe they don't get to decide like how to spend money on themselves or their children. Maybe don't get to have their own vehicle or have access to the vehicle without checking in with their partner. It can be some of those really, it's things that's just like thinking about like, what do we want for our own lives? What does freedom look like? And anything that you see that doesn't look like freedom. And, some of us might have a partner where they're better with money. So they might help us with, they might be in charge of the household budget or paying the bills, but that doesn't mean we don't have access to the account or we don't get to take cash out of the account whenever we want, right? So it's like paying attention to what are the things that sound like someone doesn't have freedom in their financial decisions, where they need the permission of a partner to make a financial decision, to spend money, to use gas, to whatever. It's like doing any of those types of things I think are a big part of, or threats, to like, I will get the house, I will get the, like I'll get the children because you can't pay for their summer camps in the summer. So I'm going to get them all summer, like what does, I think whatever any of those things look like, threatening to like come to someone's workplace or, if someone comes to their workplace and kind of disrupts the workplace, I think those are all like examples of financial abuse, but it can definitely be subtle. And it's part of like the broader story of where someone doesn't have like freedom in their personal lives.
And you can see this, I think you can also see this with individuals that may seem like they're in a good place in their career, they're making good money, and they may be actually the primary supporter for this individual, that maybe their abuser, right? And that they can't leave because all of a sudden it's like the resources, they'll have to have two households that they're caring for. And so it can show up at all levels of an organization.
I think another big thing is the sabotage of any future financial freedom as well. So doing things like destroying the credit, or purposely draining accounts and taking away, and stopping the ability to grow without that person, and creating that inability to leave because the future already has these sense of threat against it.
Thank you. That was really helpful. I think a lot of service providers will use their active listening to try to pick up on things like that might be occurring.
Yeah, and I really just want to highlight Adrian's point is it doesn't have to be the primary breadwinner who's doing the financial abuse. That there are plenty of people who are in positions where they do make enough money or they do have, a good job or whatever, and that they can still experience abuse. And so it's really about the behavior, not about who brings in the most money or has that. That form of power.
Thank you. Well, should we go ahead and move on to Michaela? Michaela Mandala. I think I said it right that time.
You did. You got it. You got it.
Well, you've only been my colleague for a couple of years. I could get your name right once in a while. It might be nice. Anyway, Michaela, thanks for joining us, and I'm eager to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Terry. And it's good to see there's a lot of familiar faces here. I want to just boost the 40-hour DVSA training that Whatcom DVSAS does. I did it in a different place, but I learned all of my foundations, I would say, of domestic violence and sexual assault advocacy support in that training. It was huge. So highly recommend. So my role in all of this is essentially I oversee a lot of the case management and different staff that serve survivors of domestic violence in our permanent supportive housing program. So I work with the Opportunity Council with many of you all here, and how this kind of happens is folks enter coordinated entry and to meet the criteria to live in our permanent supportive housing program called Dorothy Place that houses survivors of domestic violence. Everyone who lives there has experienced chronic homelessness. So they have lived in a place not meant for habitation for 12 months or longer. And they are all survivors of domestic violence. So what that looks like is everyone has a lease, and they essentially have their own unit. And this can look really different for how we do support to survivors. All the staff are trained in DV and SA services. And we have a huge focus around tenant landlord law, because a lot of the individuals living in our units really need to be aware and have an understanding of their protections there, keeping in mind as well that you know, that if they have a situation where they're feeling unsafe, that they can have staff come in. So we do safety planning with folks. We have safe exit plans for individuals if they're the perpetrator is living in the unit with them, which can look like us, you know, having the resident exit and exiting. We would have a security staff or work with law enforcement if the resident is willing to physically exit perpetrators from folks' units. You know, we definitely saw during the pandemic an increase in violence in units and for survivors. And so we really had to up our services on site, especially since resources were limited for everybody. So we look at sometimes same day lock changes for units if some of these keys have been taken, adding additional alarms to windows. Every visitor of our properties has to do a background check. And if they screen in with having a domestic violence charge on their background, they're denied as a visitor and they can't be reapproved until it's disclosed. Everyone has to sign documentation to release the information, but it has to be disclosed to the resident that this person, their background and their charges. And the only way they can be approved to be on the property is if the resident says that they're comfortable having them there. So these are just kind of some of the immediate things we do. We definitely connect folks to DVSAS if we're seeing that the person is at risk of potentially being physically harmed or killed by their partner. We would call with them and support them in doing a shelter screening. Every resident at the site has 24-hour accessibility to staff, so they can either call or there's staff on site at all times. There's a gate on the property that only residents have a key card access to, and it's monitored by cameras at all times. This can definitely, you know, for some folks, it can feel really invasive to have the cameras around. So we have a lot of conversations around how we utilize it as a safety tool for those residents, and how we're not trying to make it a form of being punitive. We're trying to ensure their safety on site. In a situation where a resident doesn't feel safe in their unit, we even sometimes have funds to hotel them temporarily. And if they consent, then we can make sure their unit is secured and safe. We also have options to transfer over time. It's very, very limited and rare, but if somebody's experiencing prolonged domestic violence or stalking, we can look at transfer opportunities into other programs or buildings through Opportunity Council to ensure their safety. We do support around getting people connected to legal resources, law advocates. Everyone has very, very basic training. We don't give legal advice, but could tell somebody about the different protective orders that are open to them if they're interested. And we do have on our other properties, you know, we also have this mix where we serve people that sometimes perpetrate domestic violence as well. And so we have a connection to abuser accountability programs and talking about how we put a lot of accountability on folks that are clearly perpetrating domestic violence, and we try to provide a lot of support for victims and survivors of domestic violence. So that's my really quick run through of some of our domestic violence services for permanent supportive housing residents. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I'm sorry, I don't have a PowerPoint.
But Kayla, I have a question. This is Pam Kahn.
Hey, Pam.
Hi. We've had some instances where we have had a tough time finding classes for people who are coming out of the legal system required to attend domestic violence. I'm talking about perpetrators. Do you have any good sources for quality classes? See, it seems our Department of Corrections don't have any real good resources.
Yeah.
Or maybe there just aren't any good groups.
Yeah. I mean, I have a list of what exists in Skagit and Whatcom County. that I could send to you. There's 2 models for abuser accountability programs, which I can also send you the details on that. But essentially, the most robust response to abuser accountability takes a community response model, which essentially is that somebody would enter in and then they would be directed into kind of services around group and individual therapy, addressing their, putting the accountability back onto them, being really clear that this isn't about anger and it's not about, somebody having a hard time expressing their emotions as much as it is about power and control, and identifying kind of those different systems and ways in which that person is abusing an intimate partner or a family member or things like that. So yeah, I can send you all that information, Pam. I think I have your email.
Yes, please.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions for our speakers? You can put them in chat. I'd be happy to read them.
I have a question pretty much for the group, actually a couple. One, if anybody knows, beyond what Pam just asked, services from housing through treatment of some sort for folks who, specifically adolescents and young adults who were victims, who became perpetrators. And it seems like there's a serious lack up here, but even anywhere in Western Washington, does anyone know of services where someone who wants to heal and not be a perpetrator can get help?
There are no certified DV perpetrator treatment providers in this county that work with juveniles. I don't know about all the other counties, but there is a little more access if people can do it virtually now, but that is we just have a huge gap in general in any treatment for offenders, and especially for juveniles. There's absolutely no DV offender resources specific for juveniles or young adults.
What can we do about that?
We've tried to do some things the city and the county city of Bellingham, Whatcom County actually now put money into reimburse. You don't get paid enough to be a certified treatment provider. And so they put money so that providers can at least get reimbursed for people who do not. So if you're have to do DV perpetrator treatment, you have to pay for it if you're a client. So now the city and the county can pay for some of those costs. That goes through district court probation. But again, those are adult, district court probation are adults. And
Right.
so I think maybe advocacy for it to go through juvenile court, but first you would need to recruit, or next you would need to recruit people who want to get that training and do that kind of treatment. And that has been extremely, extremely challenging over the years. A number of providers have tried it and haven't been able to keep their business open. It needs to be a passion project almost as part of a larger system. So I think that's a great question. I do know actually going through the state legislature right now is a bill that would address the way that for sex offenses, juveniles are registration and notification. It would eliminate some of that and decrease the length of time that juveniles are required to register as sex offenders, because there's some real research that shows that is actually not effective at all in protecting public safety. It actually leads to victimization in the future for those juveniles. But that bill would increase the ability of associate, associate level therapists or whatever, to provide that kind of treatment under the supervision of a fully certified therapist. It would also approve different treatment modalities. So hopefully that would increase for juveniles who have committed sex offenses to be able to get treatment, but that won't necessarily address domestic violence. But the legislature has been looking, this is the third year they're looking at that bill. So it will be curious to see how it goes through.
That's
a place that might be worth starting if somebody feels like they want to start this endeavor is through DCYF has a committee called the SAY Committee, which is a sexually aggressive youth committee. And they get together, they have different people from different services. I used to be on it when I was at Skagit County, and we staff kiddos who are deemed as sexually aggressive, and are we going to approve them to get this funding for treatment? And 99.9% of the time, it would be, well, we need to have the specialist come in and do an evaluation on the youth to deem, you know, where they're at on this. Is this there's an act out due to being a victim, or is this they're deemed to perpetrate like again over and over? And so it might be worth reaching out to that committee to say, who is the person who you have who does this evaluations? Because they may be equipped to say, here's how you could facilitate this idea to create treatment for youth in like a group setting.
What was the name of the committee again?
It's called the SAY committee. So it's a sexually aggressive youth.
Thank you.
Thanks, that's helpful. And it's also really related to homelessness. We see so many people entering the housing pool or apply for services who are registered sex offenders related to a crime committed when they were juveniles. It's really difficult to navigate that as a homeless individual of any age. It is the #1 barrier for keeping people out of housing. We have nearly no housing for registered sex offenders. Any other questions for our guests? Okay, we're winding down here. So
I actually had an unrelated question as well.
Go for it, Rachel.
Can you hear me? Thank you. Susan, I'm not sure I heard you correctly, but I've read the PIT questions. Is it accurate to say that there's no specific sexual violence question in the PIT count? And if not, I just want to advocate that it be added, because secrets keep us sick. And if we're out there talking about it, that opens the door to let people know it's safe to talk about it. I don't know if that's a question or a comment.
It's kind of both, and it's related to our work with the health department and organizing the PIT count and the volunteer center here. The questions on the PIT count is something we've been discussing what those should look like. Sometimes the questions are prescribed, and we can't control the language, but I do think it's worth asking the question. The concern is always, is this trauma informed when you're having a 30-second interaction and you're counting everybody you can on one day? So I kind of wonder if our housing application data might be better or different. I don't know. I'm interested in investigating that.
With you there, sister.
Hey, wondering if we can move on to our update section. Samia, would you mind doing an update for the city?
Happy to, and thank you so much to the presenters and those providing DV services. And also to Skagit, my update is a little bit related to the Skagit Home Consortium, as they talked about their funding is related to the Home Investment Partnership Program, which is from HUD. It doesn't include the city of Bellingham, and that's because the city of Bellingham has our own HUD funding. We have more than just that home program. We have community development block grant funding from HUD, and we have our own local funding as well. So we're also in the midst of that consolidated planning process. I think a lot of you probably have been notified of that. We've been undergoing sort of community research for a year already now, and just happy to have the input from many of the providers that have given that to us. And I also want to acknowledge I'm sitting in for Katie Sullivan, who's on maternity leave right now. So she would normally be doing this probably more eloquently than me, but anyway, I'm happy to be here. And so we are in the midst of that process, and part of that planning process means that we solicit applications from folks in the community for funding. We call that our NOFA process, or Notice of Funding Availability process. We have a lot of opportunities, and I'm just gonna click enter on our website. Most of these closed on the 30th of January, but we are extending that deadline until next week at noon, Thursday the 9th. So There is still an opportunity to apply for our funding. And all of those opportunities are on that website linked there. And feel free to contact me if you have questions. We also have a prevention of homelessness opportunity right now, which is a little different from our normal applications where folks can just submit a letter to the city with their ideas of prevention. So that is just on a rolling basis. So there isn't a concrete deadline for that. So we're happy to just take any and all ideas for that, at least through the end of February. And I think that's all I had, unless folks have any questions.
Thanks, Samia. I wanted to clarify, you said that the regular NOFA that was due on the 30th is extended until next Thursday at noon?
Noon, yes.
Okay,
So
it's
to
good to
yourself
know.
Wednesday, but we'll take them until noon on Thursday. Yep.
Any other questions for Samia? Okay. I don't know who to ask to do the county update. Maybe Chris, because he's unmuted.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in and I'll try to be brief. I'm keeping my eye on the clock here. I actually don't have all that much to say, so it shouldn't be too hard. With the caveat that I'm always available for questions. So if not here and now, then maybe then and there. I'll mention a little bit on the severe weather shelter. I'm guessing some folks have some interest around that. We have seen shelters activated or open for about 20 nights each so far this season. That's I think it's actually 21 for the one in Bellingham and another 21 for the one in Ferndale. We were estimating going into the season that we'd be looking at more like 15 nights for the season. That's kind of the standard norm expectation of weather based on the temperature thresholds, conditions, all that good stuff. So it's been a little bit of a harsher season than we expected. We also thought that we'd see maybe 35 people using those shelters. We've seen 48 on average. And one night we even had 70 in the severe weather shelters. That's for the Road to Home shelter at Civic Field in Bellingham. The Ferndale shelter has averaged 6 per night when they've been open, and as high as 13. All together, if you throw in base camp and their expansion at the old drop-in center, the Christ the King is staffing, the high water mark has been 322 individuals accessing shelter. That is a lot of people. It does not include people staying at shelter through DVSAS, through Northwest Youth Services, through the YWCA, Sun House, all those other places that also have emergency shelter, the motels that we've mentioned. So we are looking at a significant increase in people utilizing shelter this winter. I will be happy to see the point in time count results because it'll be informative. I'm a little bit scared about how high that number might be. It does speak to the urgency of the work that we're doing. So in that regard, it is welcome, but it's always hard to see those numbers go up. Move on. We've had some minor question here. Does 322 include the normal baseline base camp? Yes. So that's everyone at base camp on Cornwall at the spot down in Holly Street, I guess, drop-in centers on Holly, as well as the 2 weather-dependent shelters. Back here at the health department, we've had a few little staff changes. I moved into the housing program supervisor role in December. I think that is more recent than the last time this group met. That's a new position. We had somebody who was kind of doing that and some other things, so they are focused on those other things now. And I guess I'm responsible for the housing program here at the health department. So everything that goes wrong, just look in my direction. I'll take this glares. We had somebody hired for affordable housing development support. I think I might have mentioned that in December. We got a few good weeks with them and they moved on to greener pastures. I think that's the right phrase. Anyway, they're not here anymore. Left on a good note, but we are without that position again. So we're looking at a little bit of a setback there in the housing development realm. Luckily, Sammy is real friendly and she helps me out when I have questions. So we got that going for us. The legislation is moving through. It's unclear what's going into committees, what's moving through committees. I feel like it's hard to watch from my perspective because you don't know what's going to happen. You get excited about stuff and it fizzles out or there's surprises. But you know, as a county employee, it's hard for me to advocate because I work for the government. But I do want to encourage all of you to get involved. That's a real opportunity to bring some of these issues forward. I know there's some information on the agenda about getting connected with the Advocacy Day. I would encourage you to do that. I've done that in the past for other non-housing related stuff, and it was a really cool experience. It's fun to be a part of the government. Government works a lot better when people are engaged and participating and helping folks like me and the policymakers be better informed, because this stuff's complicated. And then lastly, on a sort of personal note, I have observed through the agency partners that we work with, people have been looking around and figuring out what they want to do with their lives and moving on. And my sense is that there's a lot of people that are tired and exhausted and have been working really hard for the last few years. So I just want to first say thank you to everyone on this call. I know there's a lot of service providers, a lot of community members that are active and engaged, and I think that's really, really meaningful. We're going to see numbers like the point in time count that look like we're not doing our jobs well. I don't think that's the story that we should pull from that. I think that there's a lot of people who are housed that don't get counted and don't get seen. So I like to say our shortcomings are very obvious and our successes are practically invisible. So thank you. And please take the time to tell one of your colleagues that you appreciate what they're doing. We're here for each other. I know it's hard to do this in a virtual setting, but you know, tell the people you work with that you like what they're doing and you appreciate what they're doing and that's meaningful. That's it. I'll end on that. So thanks everyone. And yeah, questions are welcome here now or then and there.
I didn't realize how much I needed that pep talk, Chris, so I really appreciate it. Thank you. Any questions for Chris? Okay, I'm going to get started on my update. I have something to show you. I'm really excited. It's kind of dumb. I've been talking about it for months. Let's see if I can do this correctly. Can you see this picture? The service center has moved. We're still at 1111 Cornwall, but we've moved upstairs and we've decked out this lobby to be our area for housing navigation. And my colleagues fixed it up so nice with plants and art, and it's really comfortable and welcoming. Our walk-in hours are 1 to 4, and this is for housing navigation services. This works best for folks who have some income, frankly. This is a position that can address Pam's concern that she brought up with the Skagit County Home Consortium, but how difficult it is to navigate all of these different websites, all of these different landlords, all of their requirements. We have a housing navigator named Alana, who's responsible for a lot of this lovely office here. That meets with folks. She can do it by appointment or just drop in basis here at Opportunity Council. She's got, you can't see it, but there's like a little side table with a printer. There's a phone for folks to use, computers to use, lots of support with housing search. And under that printer, she's got set up a little snack area, some beverages, some tea, because honestly, when people are in crisis, just having a minute to eat something, drink something, feel welcome, and that hospitality can really assist with people being able to get past that fight or flight mode and really start thinking about the goals that they want to meet. So that's one thing I'm really excited that I wanted to show you. It's silly, it's just our lobby, but it's been a long time coming and I'm really happy about it. We're doing this on a one-on-one basis. So people will come to Opportunity Council, the Community Resource Center, that's just our lobby. Just come to our front desk during those hours. You can come with your client and say, hey, can we talk to the housing navigator? And they'll make arrangements for Alana to come down and escort them upstairs. And there's no one else that can access this room while they're together. So it's relatively private. I want to talk about Advocacy Day briefly. I know it's already 5 o'clock. I'm so sorry, but I'm just going to show you what I've got here. we're holding an educational session tomorrow from 3 to 4. And the reason we do this, Connor sent this out to the coalition before the meeting today, but if anyone didn't get it and they're interested, please hit us up, contact Connor, he'll forward it to you. It's going to be on Zoom. And the reason we need to strategize ahead of the meeting is that our meetings with our lawmakers are 15 minutes each. So we need to be on point on what we're going to say and make sure that we are aligned with one another and using our time well and really maximizing those times. We received our appointments with lawmakers just this week, so it feels really rushed to me, but it's super important. This is what we've got set up so far. Most of the appointments are next Tuesday and Wednesday. So the 42nd district, which is it's most of Whatcom County and half of Bellingham. And then the 40th district is half of Skagit County, a bunch of San Juan County, and a little bit of Whatcom, but it kind of bifurcates Bellingham. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is that if you want to attend, you will go to the appointment where your district is. And I have actually a map I can show as well. We can share this information about the appointments with you as you contact us with interest, but I just want to show you what the, what am I trying to say? Am I still sharing a screen? Can you see this? Yeah? Okay, sorry. My screen got real weird. I want to stop sharing. Really sorry that I can't suddenly figure out Zoom after 3 years of this. Marisa, are you still here? Can you stop me sharing?
I am. Okay, let me see. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see here. It's telling me that because you're the main host now that I can't touch it.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, oh, I figured it out. God. All right, I did it. Okay. I just want to show you where your districts are. I think you can see it real quickly based on where you live and which lawmakers you would want to meet with if you choose to join us. Let's see if I don't screw this one up. Can you see a map? Map, yeah. This area here is the 40th district, and it goes right through Bellingham. So for example, my colleague Marisa, she lives on the other side of the lakeway from me. She's in the 40th. I'm in Sunnyland, so I'm up here in the 42nd. So the 42nd is this big swath of Whatcom County, and the 40th is several counties, including a chunk of Bellingham. So based on where you live, that's the meetings that you would want to choose to join if you want to join us on Advocacy Day, and I encourage everyone to do so. And the only other thing I can think to say is that we are concluding the pet count, and I share Chris's concerns. The HA team did a phenomenal job as always, but when they came back on the first day at lunchtime and telling me they had 300 surveys, I kind of died a little inside. So I'm really concerned about that, and we'll just take it as it comes and do the best we can with what we have and advocate for more. Let's see. I think that's all I had to say, unless there's questions or if anyone wants to say something. There's 5 minutes for public comment. I know we went over time. I apologize, but I'm willing to stick around for that if anyone wants to speak. Okay. Well, in that case,
Sherry,
yeah.
I'm sorry, really quick. I just popped in the chat. Anybody who plans to attend Advocacy Day, they are encouraging everyone, if comfortable with it, to wear the color red to represent Advocacy Day for homeless housing, so forth and so on. So if you plan to attend and you've got something red, even a scarf, that would be lovely.
Did I forget completely to mention that all these appointments are virtual? I did, didn't I? They are virtual. We don't have to drive to Olympia. So I think a lot of people are finding that more accessible. And you can participate from home. So hit us up if you want to participate. Our next meeting is April 6th. Our topic is going to be seniors. Looking forward to that. I don't have speakers lined up, but I will. And thank you everybody for attending today. I really appreciate your time. And especially thanks to our speakers, which I think most of them had to leave already. All right, then. Take care, everybody.
Thanks all.